When it comes to leaving an audience in stunned silence, few other genres can ever dream to match the power of a well-crafted horror film. The genre itself allows for a sense of creative freedom that often can't be found elsewhere, giving writers and directors a chance to explore extreme or taboo subjects that they otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to do, as well as allowing audiences the chance to submerge themselves in some darkness from the comfort of their living rooms. Naturally, this means that there's a whole slew of films that not only seek to shock their audiences into submission, but ultimately leave them questioning what they've just experienced in the last 90 minutes. Such head-scratchers are the topic of today's list. Due to the bizarre and often shocking nature of some of the films mentioned here, we won't be offering up any spoilers that would detract from the overall what the F nature that we're so keen for you to experience. So strap yourselves in and open your mind to all manner of depraved possibilities, because here's 10 horror films that will leave you saying what the F once the credits roll. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 horror movies that will make you say, WTF did I just watch? Number 10, In Fabric. We're starting off strong with this one. Dear viewers, let me introduce you to In Fabric, a film about a killer dress. No, you heard that correct. This is quite literally a film about a killer dress. Written and directed by Peter Strickland, the glorious mind behind Berberian Sound Studio and The Duke of Burgundy, both of which could come highly recommended by the way. In Fabric is a slow-burning spookfest whose central premise is nowhere near as silly in practice as it first sounds. The film tells the story of Sheila, a recently divorced bank teller who, during a bout of depression and self-loathing, buys a stunning red dress in a bid to restore her self-confidence. However, she soon begins to realise this dress is like no other, as it has a tendency to maim whoever wears it, leading to many dress-based horror shenanigans. In Fabric was fairly divisive on release, with many critics lavishing praise on its atmosphere and performances, but some were quick to criticise its slow pace and general absurdity. Genre aficionados, however, were keen to lap up its giallo-inspired weirdness, and the film, much like the rest of Strickland's work, has amassed a dedicated cult following. Number 9. Malignant. Over the course of his storied career, James Wan has delivered all manner of frightening flicks in a variety of subgenres. He's given us tense psychological thrills with Saw, old-school gothic chills with Dead Silence, and plenty of things that go bump in the night with the first 2 Conjuring films. Naturally, fan anticipation was high when Wan announced that he was helming a new original film, and speculation ran on what genre he'd be tackling next. And then Malignant came out and people still weren't sure. Without delving into spoilers, Malignant is a wild ride that continually shifts genres and tones throughout its runtime, keeping viewers on the edge of their seat as they try and guess exactly where the plot is going. Hardcore fans of the genre may be able to see some of the early indicators, as Wan very openly wears his influences on his sleeve, with many nods to the likes of Dario Argento and David Cronenberg littered throughout. It's certainly not for everyone, and the reveal in the third act will either make or break your experience with it, but Malignant is undeniably stylish and highly entertaining schlockfest that must be seen to be believed. Number 8. Titan. Julia Ducarno had many eyes on her after her debut feature Raw made a splash in the horror community, and her follow-up Titan did not disappoint. A psychological body horror extravaganza of shocking violence, disturbing character pathos, and autophilia that is every bit as puzzling as it is mesmerizing. Titan tells the story of Alexia, who had a metal plate put on her head as a child following a nasty car accident. As a result of this, she has formed an unusual bond with mechanical objects, most notably in her sexual attraction to cars, which the film takes a gleeful delight in showing us, and ultimately she feels that she's not entirely human herself. Alexia also holds another dark secret. She's also a serial killer by night whose body count is rapidly rising. What I've just described is contained in just the first 10 minutes, and what transpires after that delves into themes and scenarios that will surprise and intrigue even the most hardened horror fans. Offering up no spoilers here, Titan is a film to be experienced, and one that will swing you wildly from disturbed, puzzled, and even a little bit emotional at times. What more could you ask for? Number 7. Mother. Darren Aronofsky is no stranger to the horror genre, with the luscious Black Swan and devastating Requiem for a Dream showing off a significant flair for disturbing imagery, but arguably it's his 2017 film Mother that remains his most baffling. Starring Jennifer Lawrence at the height of her powers, Mother follows Lawrence as an unnamed woman who shares a house with a struggling author played by Javier Bardem. She's shown to be an attentive homemaker who takes pride in her surroundings and enjoys the tranquil nature of their shared existence. Said tranquil existence is then rudely interrupted by a seemingly never-ending parade of people who barge their way into this once peaceful home, and the escalation of events becomes increasingly more hostile and overbearing to the point of near suffocation. We aren't going to spoil any of the truly nasty shocks that Mother delivers, but believe us when we say this is one incredibly stressful film, one that garnered quite a heated reaction from critics and audiences on release, something the studio were quick to capitalise on by incorporating the reviews from a disgusted critic directly onto the film's posters. As I say, there's no such thing as bad publicity. Number 6. Skinamarink. The most recent entry on this list, and arguably the strangest one of them all, Skinamarink has been dividing horror fans since its release in 2022, with some claiming it to be the scariest film in decades, whereas others believe it to be the cure for insomnia. For our money, it's one of the most highly effective horror films in recent years, managing to evoke a very real sense of impending doom through its use of analog horror and abstract presentation. The film follows a pair of young children who wake in the middle of the night to discover their parents are missing, and all the doors and windows in the house start to vanish. All the while, a malevolent force within the walls begin to exert its influence over the children, leading to some highly disturbing scenes that many will find upsetting. Its highly experimental nature will no doubt be a turn-off for many people, but if you can get on board its singular wavelength, you'll find it to be a truly chilling experience. For those who can't, however, it'll remain one of those baffling and perhaps boring things they've ever seen. Number 5. Beyond the Black Rainbow. Courtesy of director Panos Cosmatos, who helmed the similarly bizarre Nicolas Cage vehicle Mandy back in 2018, Beyond the Black Rainbow is a wonderfully weird slice of psychological sci-fi horror that's every bit as psychedelic as it is enthralling. Set in the 1960s, the film details the goings-on of the Arboria Institute, a research facility whose philosophy is that humans can move into a new age of serenity via technological advancements. The head researcher, Dr. Arboria, becomes fascinated with a young woman named Elena, who appears to possess telekinetic powers. What transpires from there is a series of strange experiments that become increasingly more intense and disturbing, albeit with gorgeous visuals that'll keep you transfixed to the screen. Somewhat similarly to Cosmatos' Mandy, Beyond the Black Rainbow is a relatively slow burn that gradually pulls you into its world before going full tilt crazy with trippy visuals and existential horror. Beyond the Black Rainbow is a Marmite sort of affair that may be a little too slow-paced for some, but there's plenty of craziness and eye-popping visuals that demand your attention. If you enjoyed the neon-soaked madness of Mandy, you should definitely give this one a go. Number 4. House. An undisputed classic of Japanese cinema and one of the most bonkers films ever committed to celluloid, House is a must-see, not only for horror fans, but anyone who has an appreciation for the stranger side of cinema. House follows a teenage girl, Gorgeous, and her 6 friends as they visit her aunt for their summer break. What should be a simple trip to the countryside soon turns out to be the most surreal and oftentimes hilarious nightmare in which the girls are set upon by a malevolent force that intends to pick them off one by one. The general premise for House sounds like your typical run-of-the-mill haunted house fodder, but the execution and insane presentation is where the film truly shines. Via a mix of strange special effects, jarring tonal shifts, and a wicked sense of humour, House culminates in a truly singular experience that many filmmakers have attempted to emulate but have never been able to truly match. You may often hear people throw around the phrase, "You've never seen anything quite like this before," but in the case of House, it's so very true. It's an absolute gem of Japanese cinema and one that will permanently live in your head rent-free for years after you watch it. Number 3. Climax. Gaspar Noé is no stranger to the extreme side of cinema, having carved a name out for himself at the turn of the century with a string of gruesome and confrontational films such as I Stand Alone and the truly unpleasant Irreversible. Throughout his career, Noé has offered up fans a whole host of cinematic depravity, but of all of his films, it's perhaps Climax that had people scratching their heads and shielding their eyes the most. Set during the winter of 1996, Climax sees a dance troupe spend an evening rehearsing for an upcoming show in an abandoned school, which soon devolves into a debauched after-party. Things start off innocently enough, but it soon becomes apparent that the sangria everyone's been drinking has been spiked with LSD, leading to a string of violent outbursts, intense paranoia, and wince-inducing displays of human cruelty. It's a very grounded nightmare that continually pulls the rug out from under the viewer, but is never anything less than compelling. The vast majority of its script and dance numbers were improvised by the cast, which lends the film a sense of authenticity, as if the viewer themselves is also trapped within this hellish school and may be the next person to be turned on by the troupe. Number 2. Possession. One of the horror genre's most celebrated and downright bizarre films, Possession is a tour de force of nightmarish cinema that will leave its mark on all those who see it. Focusing on the deteriorating marriage of Cold War-era spy Mark and his ballet teacher wife Anna, Possession is perhaps the most unconventional and downright confrontational film about divorce that you're ever likely to see. From the very first scene, there's something incredibly off about the film. Everything from the music, the cinematography, and even the fearless performances of its two leads feel like they're melding together to form something truly uncanny. It all culminates in one incredibly bizarre and explosive finale that raises far more questions than it answers, prompting viewers to submerge themselves in its darkness for repeat viewings if they want to fully understand every facet of its nightmarish narrative. It's certainly a challenging watch in some areas, and it definitely isn't everyone's cup of tea, but for those who like their horror to be a little bit abstract and very over the top, Possession is a one-of-a-kind experience that will leave you feeling both disturbed and exhausted, a true classic of the genre, and one that's lost none of its potency over the years. Number 1. Martyrs. For a brief time in the early 2000s, the French were on the cutting edge of horror with the New Extremity movement, producing a slew of films that shocked casual fans and delighting gorehounds in equal measure. Whilst the likes of Frontiers and Inside live on in infamy for their grueling violence, it's Martyrs that takes the crown for the most extreme of all the French extremity on offer. To delve into the plot would be a disservice to this film's visceral power, but believe us when we say that Martyrs is the kind of story that grabs you by the throat and forces you to confront the most sadistic elements of human behavior. It presents an intriguing narrative that continually shifts between genres but manages to remain coherent, and each new element that's introduced manages to add a greater context to depravity on display, all the while finding new and vile ways to shock you into submission. Be warned though, this is really not for the faint of heart, and even the most hardened horror fans may find this one difficult to stomach. Not one to watch if you're having a bad day, that's for sure.